Moving on. I'm going to assume that for most of you at this point in your life, you do not want to have children, so you don't want fertilization. So let's talk about contraception. Contraception is anything that prevents fertilization. All right, so with that, let's move on to contraception. So the barriers are the simplest form of contraception. They're the ones that have been around the longest. They are anything that physically prevents the movement of sperm toward the uterus. Today we have male condoms and female condoms. Male condoms have been around for literally millennia. They've been made out of everything from sheep intestines to leather to probably many other things. Today they're generally made of latex, and it comes rolled up, and you roll it down over an erect penis. Yes, the penis does need to be erect before the condom is rolled onto it. And then there needs to be a little space at the end to accommodate the volume of ejaculate. The female condom goes inside the vagina. One part of it covers the cervix, the other end covers the labia outside. And for those of you who think that condoms are inconvenient and decrease sensation and ruin the mood, those things are all true. Condoms absolutely, completely suck, but they suck less than sexually transmitted diseases. And condoms remain the only thing that protects against the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. Now, every time I say that, somebody says, but what about abstinence? Here's the thing. Abstinence works great as long as you leave your clothes on. Because remember, sperm swim. You do not have to actually have sexual intercourse in order to get pregnant because sperm swim. If you are wet and you are wearing, say, just underwear and a penis ejaculates near the vaginal orifice, those sperm can swim through the holes in your clothing, which are gigantic compared to a sperm. They can swim up the vagina, up the uterus, and up the fallopian tubes. It is possible to get pregnant without having intercourse. It is also possible to spread sexually transmitted diseases through oral sex. So, and through other kinds of, through oral sex and anal sex, and through hand touching. So please use condoms. Yes, use condoms every time. If you're too drunk to put on a condom, you're too drunk to have sex. Other barriers, spermicidal foam is something that's inserted into the vagina, kills the sperm before they reach the cervix. A sponge is, it's a little sponge filled with spermicide, so it kills sperm, and it's inserted over the cervix, and it can be left in place for up to 24 hours. So it does allow for a little more spontaneity, but again, it doesn't protect against sexually transmitted diseases. Finally, the diaphragm is a little silicone cup that is inserted over the cervix, and it's used with a contraceptive jelly that is also a spermicide. So it kills any sperm that get to the diaphragm and then actually prevent them going into or through the uterus. So those are all barriers, but do not protect against the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. Remember, the only thing that protects against the spread of sexually transmitted diseases are condoms. Okay, the other thing to note, the reason that these have spermicide with them is that, so like this sponge can be left in place for 24 hours. But sperm can live inside the female reproductive tract for about 3 days. So it's important to kill any sperm that get into the vagina if you don't want to get pregnant. All right, so next up are the chemical contraceptives. And this is the other biggest category of contraception. The birth control pill comes in a number of different formulations. It is either progesterone only or progesterone and estrogen. And you remember that progesterone is the chemical, the hormone that is released by the corpus luteum after ovulation. So it's a signal to the body that ovulation has happened. The way that the pill works is that you take the pill every day and you keep a high level of progesterone, and that high level of progesterone prevents the release of the egg from the ovary, because progesterone gets released after an egg has been released. Progesterone stays high during pregnancy. So it essentially, the birth control pill tells the other follicles in the ovary that pregnancy has happened. So don't prepare another follicle. So it actually prevents the release of the egg. On the pill, a woman is going to have a period every 28 days, or under new formulations, every 3 months. So there are some now where you take the pill for 90 days, and then you take a placebo, or you don't take anything for a week, and then you have your period. All birth control pills for most women lead to lighter flow and fewer symptoms such as cramps and mood swings. And that's because the progesterone stays high, the thickness, the endometrial layer doesn't thicken as much as normal, because essentially the progesterone is telling the follicles and the uterus, we've already thickened the endometrial layer. So by keeping progesterone high, it essentially bypasses that buildup of endometrial tissue. So there's less endometrial tissue to shed, so menstrual flow is much lighter. The breakdown of cells in the endometrial tissue release hormones that are called prostaglandins. And those prostaglandins can lead to things like mood swings and diarrhea, or constipation, both, yes, somehow. And the contraction of the myometrium, that muscle layer of the uterus, leads to cramps. That's what you're actually feeling. That cramping is the contraction of the muscles of the uterus. And so without as much endometrial tissue to shed, there isn't as much cramping. So that's why the pill leads to those kinds of symptoms. Now, for a lot of women, the pill actually creates mood swings. It decreases sexual desire, which is, great if what you're trying to do is not get pregnant. But it's not so great if you want to have sex with your partner. So for a lot of women, there are other side effects of the pill that make it not a great choice. So it really depends. And unfortunately, there's no way to predict who is going to respond well to the pill and who won't. So you kind of just got to try it and see what happens. The one thing that is contraindicated with the pill is if you smoke. The pill has been linked to a very small increase in the risk of strokes. And since smoking can also cause strokes, the pill is not recommended for women who smoke. So that's the only thing. Okay, so that's the birth control pill. You do take it every day. If you miss a day, then you have a chance of either breakthrough menstrual bleeding or spotting, or of getting pregnant. So then you need to use a backup birth control if you do miss a day. Okay, so other chemical contraceptives are also going to release progesterone, again, to keep the level of progesterone high to prevent the development of the follicle and the release of an egg. The implant is just a little rod that goes under the skin. It's just the size of a matchstick. Your doctor inserts it very quickly under the skin, and it can stay there for 4 years secreting progesterone. A lot of women like it because it is just insert it and forget it. And as long as you don't do this to the skin on your arm, no one can see it. So that's something that a lot of women do like. The patch sticks to the skin, and you change the patch every week for 3 weeks, and then you take it off, you have a period. The Nuva ring is the most common of the rings. Again, it's saturated with progesterone, and it slowly releases the progesterone, and it is inserted around the cervix. You keep it in place for 3 weeks and then take it out and have a period. Now, for all of these chemical contraceptives, you can just, for the patch, the pill, and the ring, you can just put in another ring or start another patch or start another pack of pills. You don't have to have a period every month. Everybody thought that we did when they developed the pill, but it turns out there is no biological reason for a woman to have a menstrual period every month. Now, a lot of people have a concern about chemical contraceptives because they do maintain a higher level of progesterone than a woman would have when she is not pregnant. And so it's, people feel like it's, messing with your natural hormones. First of all, we mess with our natural hormones all the time. I take hormone pills because my body doesn't make enough thyroid hormone. And so that's a thing we do all the time anyway. But one concern about this is that you are, you artificially elevating the level of progesterone in the body. That's a concern a lot of people have. That's actually not something that's happening. What is happening, remember that the corpus luteum continues to make progesterone for the first 3 months of a pregnancy. Prior to the birth control pill, women would have spent a lot more of their life pregnant. Not all of those pregnancies would have necessarily gone to term or produced live children, but a woman would have been pregnant a lot more often because she didn't have any way to prevent those pregnancies. So having the level of progesterone as high as it would be in pregnancy for many months at a time is actually a very normal way to live. What's abnormal is actually having a period every month. That's actually a very modern thing to do. So don't worry about that. The level that the pill raises your progesterone levels to is the same level that you would experience in pregnancy, and in some cases even lower. So it's not something that you need to worry about as doing some sort of artificial thing in your body. Okay, now one other kind of a long-term contraceptive is the Intrauterine Device, or IUD. It's a T-shaped piece of either plastic or copper that gets inserted into the uterus, and it, depending on the brand, stays in place for 3 to 12 years. The most common brand used now stays in place for about 10 years. The copper IUD, because the copper is actually toxic to sperm, it changes the way the sperm swim and they can't get to the egg. Yes, that's an actual real thing. The other thing, the plastic IUD is coated or covered with the progesterone. So it secretes progesterone, which prevents ovulation, but also thickens the cervical mucus. And that cervical mucus plug then doesn't get shed. And so it's thickened enough to prevent an actual barrier to sperm getting through. And then if sperm do get through, well, there's no egg released, so there's nothing for the sperm to fertilize. The IUD can also be used as a morning after device. It can be used for up to 5 days after unprotected sex. If it's inserted up to 5 days after unprotected sex, it can prevent a pregnancy. Remember, it's because it takes about 7 days before the blastocyst implants. Now, it is more effective sooner after intercourse than later. So doing it the day after is going to be much more effective than 5 days later. So let me show you, I'm going to show you a video from Dr. Jen Gunter. She's the one who wrote the Vagina Bible. And she's going to show the placement of the IUD, not on a real person. She's just going to demonstrate with a tester. If I can make the sound go. Okay, so one note I want to add, it is a very simple procedure. It only takes a few minutes, but she makes it sound like completely simple and problem-free. One problem is you saw how big that tester was. The cervical canal is very, very narrow, especially before a woman has given birth. And so for a lot of women, putting in the IUD is excruciatingly painful. So if you fear that it could be painful for you, it's worth talking to your doctor about getting at least a topical pain reliever, or even being under anesthetic for the insertion. Even though it only takes 5 minutes, it's really, for a lot of women, the insertion is really, really excruciating. So some kind of pain control is often needed. So just keep that in mind. But then the good thing about the IUD is that a lot of women have no periods once it's inserted. Those who do have periods, they're usually very, very light. And then it does protect you for up to 10 years. As soon as it is removed, you can get pregnant. So it does not have any long-term effects. It is not 100% effective. The only thing that is 100% effective against pregnancy is abstinence. And I mean abstinence, keep your clothes on. Any form of birth control has some risk of failure. All right, finally, there's surgical contraception, which is mostly permanent. It can be reversed, but the reversal doesn't always work. So in the female, the tubal ligation is what's done. The fallopian tubes are cut. So the menstrual cycle continues normally. The egg is formed in the follicle. It is released during ovulation. It travels down the fallopian tube, gets to a dead end, and is reabsorbed by the fallopian tube. Okay. In a vasectomy, the vas deferens is cut and each end is tied off. Both of these do have failure rates, usually very soon after they're done. And that's just because the body is really, really good at healing sometimes. And so sometimes the tubes will heal back together. So there is a low failure rate for both of these. All right, so here's a graph that shows the effectiveness of some of these contraceptive methods. So here's the methods. Here's the pregnancies per 100 women per year if they are used correctly, and then the way that people typically use them. So with no birth control at all, 85 out of 100 women usually get pregnant within a year. Now, if you want to get pregnant, that means that you have an 85% chance of getting pregnant within a year, but it also means that you have a 15% chance of just not getting pregnant. So this has led to a lot of wives' tale, what we used to call old wives' tales, and beliefs about, oh, well, you can't get pregnant on the first time, or you can't get pregnant if the woman is on top, or you can't get pregnant if you had sex in the backseat of a car. None of those things are true. You can get pregnant doing any of those things. But remember that doing nothing, 15 women out of 100 still won't get pregnant within a year. Now, if you're trying to get pregnant, that's really depressing. And so that's why doctors usually just say keep trying, because you may just be one of those 15% of women who didn't get pregnant within a year. All right. The birth control pill, if used correctly, 1 out of 1,000 women get pregnant, which means that there's 1 out of 1,000 women who got pregnant while on the birth control pill, while taking it correctly, meaning that they took it at the same time every single day, didn't miss a pill, their body still got pregnant. One of those is my hairdresser, who, she wasn't ready to have another kid. And guess what? She went on the pill and she got pregnant. She didn't realize she was pregnant until she was like 4 months pregnant because, she was on the pill. Most women don't quite take it correctly. They miss a pill. They don't take it at the same time. And so it does have about a 5% failure rate. So about 5 out of 100 women taking the pill will get pregnant within a year. Vasectomy and tubal ligation, again, sometimes the body heals from those, so be careful, especially in the immediate weeks after the procedure is done. The IUD, yes, women have gotten pregnant with an IUD in place. And in fact, when the IUD was first put in use in the, 1970s, I think, there was a story of a baby being born with an IUD in its hand, which is just the biggest little FU from the baby, I thought. But anyway, it fails. The rhythm method is where a couple tries to avoid having sex during the week that the woman is most fertile. So that's the week around ovulation. So remember that sperm can stay in the female system for 3 to 4 days. So if you have sex 4 days before ovulation, that sperm can still be there. If you have sex 4 days after ovulation, that egg is still traveling down the fallopian tube and could still be fertilized. So there's 7 or 8 days during the month around ovulation where a woman is most likely fertile. Now, the problem with the rhythm method is you should be able to have sex the rest of the month without getting pregnant because there shouldn't be an egg present. But remember, biology is complicated. And sometimes ovaries just release an egg. Some other time. Why? Because everything is always more complicated. So even if you completely do it right, there's a 1 to 9% failure rate. The thing about it is people suck at the rhythm method. And estrogen makes women increasingly desirous of sex. And so it's really hard to say no to sex when you're most fertile. So people suck at it. And about 20 out of 100 women will get pregnant using the rhythm method. Withdrawal is where the man withdraws from the woman's body before ejaculating. Again, sperm swim, and people suck at this. Condoms do have a failure rate of about 2%. They do break. People suck at storing and using condoms. They put the condom on too late. They store the condom for too long or in excessive heat, like in the glove compartment of a car, or they put it in a wallet and it gets crushed and then it gets a hole in it, or the condom breaks, whatever. Again, better than no protection, but definitely not foolproof. Diaphragm and spermicide alone, also better than nothing, but not foolproof. Now, before we go on, I do want to talk for a minute about abortion. Abortion is technically defined as the premature exit of the products of conception from the uterus. It's the loss of a pregnancy. It does not refer to why the pregnancy was lost. So a miscarriage is a spontaneous abortion. And a miscarriage of 3 or more consecutive pregnancies is termed habitual abortion or recurrence pregnancy loss, which does happen to some women. So just keep that in mind when people talk about abortion. It doesn't necessarily mean a woman just changing her mind and deciding she doesn't want to be pregnant. It could also mean that the fetus is not developing normally and won't be able to survive outside of the womb. If you make abortion illegal in all cases, then the couple that is expecting a baby and finds out that the fetus that the woman is carrying is not going to develop normally, and for example, will be born without a brain and will never survive. You are deciding for that couple that they have to carry that baby to term and then watch it die. I believe that's not a decision that we should be making for other people, that other people should be making that decision for themselves. You can decide whatever you want, but I need you to understand what you are deciding for other people. It's not just a woman deciding, oh, I don't feel like being pregnant, and so I'm going to abort this perfectly healthy fetus. Most of the time, most abortions happen within the first 10 weeks. Most of them happen within the first 8 weeks. And most of the time it is because a woman and or her partner feel that they don't have the financial resources to support a pregnancy, or because there is something physically wrong with the fetus and it won't develop to term. Okay, so that's that. Now, the morning after pill is what we call Plan B. And this is a pill with progesterone. It's a high dose of progesterone. If you take it within 72 hours of unprotected sex, it will prevent the implantation of any fertilized egg, any blastocyst. Usually. Again, there is a failure rate, and there are women who used the morning after pill and still got pregnant because it's complicated. Biology is always more complicated, and not everything works every time. So this is now readily available in the United States. It took a long time for us to get there, but even this is not 100% effective. Now, a medication abortion is how abortions are done within the first 10 weeks. So RU486 is the pill, or it's actually 2 pills that are given, which is called a medication abortion. One blocks progesterone and the other causes an emptying of the uterus, removing all of the built-up endometrium and any blastocyst that has implanted. It is 98% effective within the first 8 weeks of the last menstruation, 93% effective in weeks 9 and 10, and then it can't be used after 10 weeks. Now, the thing about the medication abortion is a woman will take the 2 pills and have usually several days of fairly extreme cramping and bleeding. It is not a fun process from everything that I have heard. And there's a 2% failure rate. Even with that, sometimes the products of the pregnancy stick around. After that, then a surgical abortion has to be done. There are 2 main techniques for doing it. The first is suction, or vacuum aspiration, which uses literally just suction to empty the uterus. So they literally put a special surgical vacuum inside the uterus and vacuum the endometrial tissue from the surface of the uterus. The other is a dilation and evacuation. This has to be done after 16 weeks, in which the cervix has to be dilated, and then a special suction takes out as much of the endometrial tissue and any pregnancy associated tissue as possible. And then special medical tools are used to scrape the endometrial layer, thank you, to make sure that all of the tissue gets removed. Now, sometimes these two procedures are required after a miscarriage. A miscarriage, again, is where a pregnancy starts and then, for whatever reason, fails, the pregnancy fails. Normally, the uterus just starts contracting and expelling the endometrial layer and anything associated with the pregnancy. Normally, it's all removed under the normal course of events, and there's no surgical follow-up required. But every once in a while, some of the endometrial tissue stays attached to the wall of the uterus. And if that happens, a woman can keep bleeding through that tissue, and she can actually die of internal bleeding from that. So a lot of times these two, one or both of these techniques, suction or dilation and evacuation, are required in order to remove any of those residual structures from the uterus. Again, this is called an abortion, even though it's just cleaning up a miscarriage that didn't happen correctly. There are women who have died from infection because doctors refused to do this. And in fact, a case like that was enough to spur the people of Ireland to finally, just a few years ago, pass a change to their constitution to make abortion legal. Because a woman who had had a miscarriage, the doctors refused to do a D&E to remove the rest of the products of the pregnancy from her uterus. She became septic, she developed a systemic infection, and she died. So again, believe what you want, but understand that when abortion is illegal, women die from preventable causes because doctors won't do procedures that could land them in prison. So, and on that happy note, I will leave that section, and then we'll come back with a section on sexually transmitted diseases, or why you should always use a condom.